Hi everyone, it's me Terry of the Yarnjoy podcast. Welcome back to another tutorial. Let's make a sock monkey. Okay, so for this we need the pattern by Yarnspirations. I will put a link below in the description box where you can print your pattern out. Okay, so I printed my pattern out. Now this pattern is actually for the sock monkey itself, and then also a baby hat or toddler hat, I don't know. Anyway, so the part of the pattern that we're going to use is when I printed it out on my computer, off of my computer, it was the second page of the pattern. That's where it has the pattern for the sock monkey. Okay, so I just printed the second page. Okay, so like I said, make sure you get your pattern printed out or on your phone available for you to look at, or however you want to, whatever you want to use to access it. And then you also need your supplies. Okay, so we're going to need 3 colors of yarn. I'm using this ball of white. It's just some scrap, just a scrap ball that I had. I'm thinking it's Red Heart Super Saver in white, but I'm not positive. Okay, but we need a pretty good size ball, not real big, because white is the there's just accents for the white. Okay, so you need some white. You also are going to need a main color for your monkey, and I am using I Love This yarn in the colorway Light Taupe. You won't need the whole entire skein, but anyway, that's the color I'm using. I believe in the pattern it calls for Red Heart Super Saver in the colorway Buff, but whatever the color you want the main color of your monkey to be. Okay, and this will be color A. Yeah, and then color C that's referred to in the pattern is some red, and so I am using this Red Heart Super Saver in the colorway Cherry Red, and you will need just a very small amount of that. Okay, so this is just like for his mouth, the lips, and the little top knot on the top of his hat. Okay, and so that is color C. Okay, and then of course you're going to need some polyfill stuffing. Okay, and what else? Okay, so you're going to need a crochet hook, of course, and I am using 3.75 millimeter. I don't know if that will focus, but it is an F hook. Okay, 3.75 millimeter. Okay, and you're going to need a yarn needle to weave in your ends and to sew some of the pieces together, and a stitch marker, and some scissors. Okay, and let's see, I think that's it. So let's get started. So the arms and the legs, the pattern is exactly the same. Okay, so let's get started, and I will show you how to make show you how to make one of the legs. Okay, and then you will make a second leg and 2 arms exactly the same way, same pattern, same stitch count and everything. Okay, so take your white or your color B, okay, whatever you want for the bottom part of the feet, okay, and the hands, and you're going to make a magic circle. Okay, if you're not very confident in making the magic circle, you can always just chain 2 and then work in the second chain from your hook, and that would be, you can do it that way as well. Okay, so after you make your magic circle, we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to do 6 single crochets into that magic circle. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, and then we're going to pull on our beginning tail to close up that circle. Okay, and we are not going to be joining our rounds. We're going to work in continual rounds. Okay, so we do want to use a stitch marker, so that way we can keep track of the first stitch of each round. Okay, so that was round 1, was these 6 single crochets that we put inside the magic loop. Now going on to round 2, we do not count the starting chain 1. If you have a hard time finding the first stitch of the round, you can always count backwards. 6 stitches, okay? So the stitch that's right underneath where my hook is, that's the first one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So into that stitch, we're going to make an increase, which is 2 single crochets. So 1 and 2, okay? We're now going to take our stitch marker, and we're going to put the stitch marker in the first of those 2 single crochets that we just made, and that will mark the first stitch of that round, okay? Now going on, finishing up round 2, we are going to do 2 single crochets in each stitch around. We've already made 2 of them. So going on, we have 3 and 4 in the next stitch, and then number 5 and 6 in the next one, okay? 7 and 8 in the next stitch, 9 and 10 in the next stitch, and then 11 and 12 in the last stitch. Okay, so now we have a stitch count of 12 single crochets, okay, at the end of round 2. Okay, so now we're going to take out our marker and we're going to go on to round 3. We're not going to join, it's going to be continuous rounds. So if we look at our instructions, it says, so rounds 3 through 8, we're just going to do 1 single crochet all the way around, and so we're going to keep our stitch count at 12, okay, 12 single crochets around, okay? So if you do that, you're going to have rounds 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. That's 6 rounds of just going around, and then moving your stitch marker each time you get to the first stitch, and count your stitches, okay? So count your rounds. So it's going to be from rounds 3 to 8, and that is 6 rounds, okay? And you should still have 12 stitches all the way around. So I just did my first single crochet of this round, so I'm going to mark it with my stitch marker, just like that, okay? And then I'm going to just do 1 single crochet in each stitch all the way around till we get to the stitch marker again. Okay, I have 1 more stitch to make and I will complete that round. Okay, so that was the end of round 3, and now I'm going to take my stitch marker out and I'm going to go on to round 4 doing the same exact thing, just 1 single crochet in each stitch around. I did the first one while I was talking and I'm going to now put my stitch marker back into that stitch, and that will be the first stitch of round 4. Okay, so you keep doing that, 1 single crochet in each stitch around, okay, and keep track of your rounds. And every time you come back to the stitch marker, take it out, make a stitch, put it back in, and that will be the first stitch of the new round, okay? And so we're going to do that until you get to the end of round 8. And I'm going to work on mine, and I will meet you back when I get to the end of round 8, okay? Okay, so I just finished round 8. I just pulled up a loop and took my hook out, and I want to share a tip with you. Sometimes if I'm having to do a whole lot of rounds and I'm watching a video or somebody's talking to me, or you know, I'm visiting with somebody as I'm crocheting, sometimes I will lose count in my stitch count if I have to do multiple rounds, okay, and it's just, you know, the same stitch over and over and over. I mean, you know, same amount of stitches around. And so I wanted to show you how you can count your rows, just in case you have feel like you have a hard time keeping track of your rows or counting your rows. Okay, so let me bring it up here close. So here is the beginning where I did my magic circle. Okay, I'm gonna make sure this is, there it is. Okay, so here is our beginning round, okay? So that is round number 1, okay? Now, if you kind of turn it to the side, where I like to count up my rows is behind my the stitch at the end of the round. Like, see, here's my marker, so I know I'm at the end of that round. So I want to count behind my last stitch. Okay, I don't want to count in front because sometimes it's more difficult to count the rows on that side. Okay, so I want to make sure I'm counting up the side behind my last stitch. Okay, and so let's count the rounds here. Okay, so this is the first one. This is where we did the magic ring, okay, or magic circle. Okay, so let's count. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay, so that tells us that we've finished round 8. Okay, so that means we are finished with our white color, or whatever color you're using for the bottom of the feet and hands, you know. And so now I want to do an invisible join, which is another tip I was wanting to show you. So let's go ahead and cut off our yarn, working yarn, and it does not need to be very long. Okay. Another thing we can do is, if you are concerned about this magic circle, or ring, if you're afraid that it's gonna come apart, which mine never has, but the way you can secure that down is you just pull it tight, and then go ahead and yarn up your needle with using your yarn needle. Okay, and then I'm just going to go ahead and go under some of these strands, going around on round 1, okay, and just kind of tightening up as I go. You can also go back the other direction underneath some of the strands, like that, to secure it. Okay, and then I just go right into my work and pull my tail to the inside. Okay, and then I'll just stuff that in and use that as part of my stuffing. Okay, so now let me show you the invisible join. I'm going to take my marker out, and now I'm going to put my hook back into the loop and pull it so I can look at these stitches. Okay, get it to focus in there. Okay, so what I'm doing is, you can see the tops of the rounds of each, the tops of each stitch. It makes that little V section. Here, let me get my needle here. See, right under there? Okay, that's a stitch. That's the first stitch of the next round, right? Or the first stitch of the previous round, sorry. And then here's the next stitch, right? Okay, so what we're going to do is, now that we have found where the first stitch is, I'm going to go ahead and just pull this yarn all the way through, okay, and just pull it out, just like that. Okay, now I'm going to take my, well, you can either use a yarn needle, or I think for this one at first I will leave my needle under there, and because that's marking the stitch I want to go into. Okay, and so the stitch I want to go into is not the first stitch, it's not stitch number 1 of this last round, it's stitch number 2. See, I skipped a stitch. Okay, so that's where I want to bring this tail through. Okay, so what I want to do is insert my hook from the outside going to the inside underneath that V. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take my needle out so I know where that is. I have room, see? So I just went into that second stitch of the round, okay, skipping the first one. Okay, and then I'm going to take my yarn tail, and from the back, going from the inside going to the outside, I'm just going to pull it through and pull it underneath that second stitch, just like that. See? Okay, so what I'm actually doing, if you can see, is I'm creating another stitch, a duplicate stitch to this first one. Okay, I'm just going to create it right on top. Okay, see, I'm just actually going to make a new stitch there. And so now I want to look at to see where my yarn tail was coming out of. This was the last stitch of that round, and see how it's coming from underneath up through the top of that stitch, you know, from underneath up to the top. Well, if you look at all these other ones, both of those strands of that V, they come up through the previous stitch, right? From the bottom up to the top, yeah. Okay, so I want it to look like that. So I'm going to yarn up my needle, my tail here, you know, yarn up the needle, Okay, and then I'm going to, if I would have gone under this stitch here, then it wouldn't look the same. It has to go from, well, from underneath going out, or you can say it backwards and say it's coming from the top through that stitch, see? So I want to go through the top, through that stitch, okay? And then when I pull it tight, see how it makes a duplicate of the stitch that it's right on top of. It looks exactly the same, okay? And you can just kind of wiggle around with the tension and to get the stitches looking the same size. And see, if you look at that, I'm hoping that it's focusing. All the stitches look the same now, you know. It's a duplicate stitch, okay? So now what I'm going to do is take this and just keep it underneath that stitch, and I'm just going to go and take it to the inside, okay? And then I'm going to poke it in as part of my stuffing. Okay, so now you really can't tell where the first stitch is of the round. They should look exactly the same, okay? Okay, so now when you're going to go into that stitch, that duplicate stitch that you made on top of the previous one, that's the stitch that you're going to go into as far as, you know, along with all the other stitches. That you're going to use that new duplicate stitch as it takes the place of the stitch underneath it. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so now let's go on to round 9, and for round 9, we're going to attach our color A, which is, for me, it's this light taupe, okay? So let me get that yarn, get my hook. I'm going to insert it into any stitch around my circle here, okay? Okay, and now I'm going to get my yarn tail and leave a little bit of a tail, because you may want to use that if you think that you want to kind of disguise the beginning stitch. I don't know, like refine it if it's a little bit rough looking as far as the stripe. Okay, I guess that makes sense. Anyway, so now I'm going to pull up a loop from back to front, see that? And then I'm going to do a chain, and that will lock down that new yarn. Okay, okay, so now I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to go right back into that first stitch, that same stitch, and I'm going to do 1 single crochet. Okay, and now I can take my beginning tail and I can kind of pull that, tighten that up. Okay, and now I'm going to continue this round. This is round 9, and I'm just going to do 1 single crochet in each stitch all the way around, and I should have 12 of them, okay, when I get around to the end. So I will continue my round, and when I get to the end, I'll meet you up there, okay? Okay, so I just finished this first round of using this new color, okay, and that was round 9, okay, and I did count and make sure I have 12 stitches all the way around my circle. Now I'm going to take this beginning tail and I'm just going to poke that inside as a part of my stitching, because I think that I'm looking here, and where I joined it, I don't think I'm going to need to make any extra stitches in there to make it look good. I think it's going to be a good join. So I just poked the working tail, or the beginning tail, in there, okay? Now if you want to, you can go ahead and stuff the bottom part here. Take some of your stuffing and start stuffing it. When I'm making a long piece like this, I like to kind of stuff as I go a little bit, okay? Okay, so going on, in our instructions, it says from rows 9 to 26 with this new yarn, color A, okay, we're just going to do 1 stitch around, continue with the 12 stitches, okay, total count per round, and we're going to do rows 9 through 26. Now, this first row of color new color, that is row 9, okay? So going on, as we continue, now we're going to be going on to round 10, okay? And so we're going to do this exactly the same all the way around. We're going to make sure that, now see, I'm putting my first stitch in that round, so I'm going to go ahead and put my stitch marker there. Okay, so I'll just move my stitch marker every time I come back to it, and I'm going to do that. This is now starting on round 10, okay, and I'm going to do that until I get to the end of, I'm going to do it until I go all the way to round 26, okay, just like that. And I'm moving my stitch marker each time I come to it. Take it out, and then you put the new stitch in and move your stitch marker, or put your stitch marker back in, and then you go around again. And so the way I'm going to do this, see now just with me talking, I just finished round 10, see that? So I'm going to move my stitch marker, put the new stitch in there, put it back, and that'll be the start of round 11. Okay, so I'm going to do that from now that I just finished round 10. So now I'm going to do it from round 11 all the way to 26. And I will meet you when I get to the end of round 26, okay? Okay, so I just finished round 26. An easy way to count this is the row that you started, the new color, that is row 9, and so you would just count from 9, then you count up 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, like that, and you go all the way up to, and you should have 26 rounds, okay? Now, I went ahead, like I said, I went ahead and cut my yarn short, or if I didn't say that before, I'm not sure. Cut my yarn short, and then I'm going to pull my yarn tail all the way through, and then I'm going to do another one of the invisible joins, because this piece is going to be a leg, okay? And so, demonstrating that invisible join again, this is the stitch number 1 of round 26. I'm going to skip that one. I'm going to the second stitch of the round from front to back, and I'm going to pull my yarn tail through there all the way through, okay? And then I'm going to go back to the stitch number 12 of that round and go from underneath. I'm going to go underneath the front loop, and I'm going to pull my yarn tail through there, okay? And then I'm going to tighten it up a little bit, and as you can see, that loop sits right on top of stitch number 1 from that round, and that is going to be the new stitch number 1 where we're going to work into, okay? So then you would take the yarn tail, because you don't need these are going to be crocheted together, so you don't need a yarn tail to sew. You don't need one to sew the legs to the body. And so you can go ahead and yarn up your needle and pull that through. Actually, I'm gonna rethink that, and let's just go ahead and leave the tail, because we may need that to sew up between the legs of the sock monkey. Once we attach, create the body up from it, there may be a gap or something somewhere between the stitches that we may need this tail to sew that up. So let's just go ahead and leave a small tail loose. Okay, so go ahead and you can pause the video or restart the video again to repeat this for your second leg. Now, if these are the legs that you're using, then go ahead, that you're making, if these are going to be the legs, go ahead and make a second one, and then go ahead and stuff them all the way up to the top, okay? And then I did the invisible join with both of those, okay? And then after you do that, then make another one, same pattern, or actually you're going to make 2 more, and they're going to be your arms. Now for the arms, I'll show you how I finished that off, okay? So here I am, I was working on one of the arms, okay, and I stuffed it, but I didn't stuff it all the way up. I'm going to go ahead and take my marker out. Okay, I stuffed it all the way except for maybe like a thumb's width is where I stopped the stuffing, okay? Now this is only for the arms, okay? Okay, so what I do is leave that, because that way the arm will hang down, easier, okay? And so I don't stuff it all the way top. I leave it about a thumb's width unstuffed, okay? Now I'm going to go ahead and fold, pinch the ends together, okay, with my working stitch on one of the edges, okay? Now if you remember, there's 12 stitches around the rounds, okay, and so half of that would be 6 stitches, but I want to end up with only 4 stitches across the top, okay? That will make it easier to crochet it into the body, okay? So if there's 6 stitches, then that means I want to do a decrease on either end and then 2 single stitches in the middle, okay? So in order to do the decrease, I'm going to go into the first stitch and its mate back behind it, right? It's paired because you're going to pair them up together. And then I'm going to draw up a loop, and then I'm going to do it again going into the next stitch and its mate from the other side and draw up a loop, okay? I have 3 loops on my hook, yarn over and draw through all 3 loops, and that's a decrease. Okay, now I'm going to do just 1 single crochet each in the next 2 stitches, going through the stitch and its mate in the back, okay, because I'm crocheting these two together, okay? So there's the first one. I'm going to do it one more time. Single crochet into the stitch and its mate in the back, okay? Okay, so that gives us 3 single crochets that we just created. Now we're going to do a decrease again, just like we did in the beginning, in the next 2 stitches. So go all the way through to the back, pull up a loop, okay, and then do it again in the very edge stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through all 3 together, okay? So now we decrease that down where there's only 4 stitches across the top and it is closed, okay? So now I'm going to cut off my yarn, and this also, you do not need a long tail because we're going to crochet this piece into the body, okay? So just cut a short tail there, just enough to be able to weave it in, okay? And then go ahead and act like you're going to do a chain 1, but then pull it all the way through to lock the stitch down. Take your yarn needle, yarn up your needle with the tail, and then go into the piece just to hide the tail into the body, okay? Just like that. Okay, and then kind of straighten it out, and then cut off your tail here that's sticking out. Okay, so now you're going to reverse again, and you're going to make 2 same exact instructions that you did for the leg, okay? And so what you're going to end up having, I didn't hide this tail, so let me stick this tail in there. So what you're going to end up having is you're going to have 4 pieces using this same pattern where you're doing rounds 1 through 26 all together, okay? 2 of them you want to leave just a little bit of a tail. You can do the invisible join at the top, but you want to stuff them all the way up to the top, okay? And then the other 2, you want to stuff them, except you want to leave about a thumb's width unstuffed, and then you want to seal off the top, like I showed you, where you end up having, it's closed because you go through both thicknesses, and you have 4 stitches, okay, across the top. And these 2 are going to be the arms, okay? So that is the end of part 1. So your homework is to repeat this video until you have 2 legs that are open-ended and stuffed all the way to the top, and then 2 arms that are stuffed all the way except for a thumb's width you leave unstuffed, and then you want to go ahead and single crochet the ends together, okay, making 4 stitches across, okay, for each, okay? So that is your homework, to make 2 legs and 2 arms, okay? And then come back for part 2, and we will start, we will unite the legs together, and we will form the body and the head, okay, and crochet the arms in there, okay? So we'll see you back in part 2. Bye.